Surgeons of Reddit, what was the biggest mistake you made while operating on a patient? Actual surgeon's take. Got into the wrong intermuscular plane during the initial approach to an anterior-based hip replacement and damaged the patient's femoral nerve. They have permanent paralysis of their quad as a result. The reason this thread is mostly full of joke answers and third-party retellings is that mistakes like this can be hard to talk about, even behind an anonymous throwaway account. Every time you put on the gown and gloves, there is a small, needling part of the back of your mind reminding you that there's a real chance you may be about to ruin someone's life. It may not be this time. It may not happen in any of the 12 other surgeries you have scheduled this week, or the 50 this month, or the 50 next month, or the 50 the following month. Major, life-altering mistakes are extremely rare, but with enough time and a big enough sample size, rare things happen all the time. That's the reality of being a surgeon. People put their life and well-being in your hands, and at some point you are going to betray that trust and hurt someone. It is going to happen. There is no amount of preparation or care that can prevent it. If you chose this life, you have chosen a life where at some point you are going to lie sleepless in bed at night wondering, I wonder how Mr./MRS X would be doing now if they'd never had the misfortune of meeting me. Thank you for responding. Not a surgeon, but I'm a histotech. We work in the pathology lab where all the specimens are sent. A surgeon did a double mastectomy based off a different hospital system's pathology report. Basically the report said she had the kind of breast cancer where both breasts need to be removed. But we found zero cancer in either breast. He was shitting bricks, so we submitted both breasts in their entirety. That's a ton of blocks and it's unheard of to submit all the tissue like this, but he needed to find cancer. I've never seen a surgeon stand there and watch the pathologist like this guy did. We all felt so bad for him and OFC the patient. He was so upset, cussing up a storm the whole time and screaming about this is why I never take outside pathology reports. Turns out the other lab had mislabeled her specimen, so some other lady got the all clear who had cancer, and she lost both breasts when she didn't. All around horrible situation and the surgeon was sick over it all. Yikes. ! Those poor women. And that poor doctor. I'm glad it got figured out, but damn. My god. Never realized people messed up like that in the medical industry. Doing something as simple as mislabeling. It happens all the time. I also work in a pathology lab, and I spend multiple hours every day contacting nurses to solve mistakes that they made/we caught. So many things come to us mislabeled or not labeled at all, and we just have to send them back. It's ruined any sense of trust I had in doctors to see all the silly mistakes they make constantly. Quick tip, don't read through these before or after having surgery. That only leaves during. Med student here. I was watching any operation when the surgeon suddenly stopped, looked towards the staff absolutely shocked, and asks, this is the wrong knee, isn't it? Basically he was told to operate the wrong knee and halfway through he realized it was too good looking to be the knee that needed the operation. Luckily there was no permanent damage done. The team ran everything together and rescheduled the surgery. How did the patient react? He was probably very grateful to have the extra incision on his other knee and have to come back a later day after mentally preparing himself that day. Not a surgeon, but I had a screw put in to hold together a fracture in my wrist. At the last moment before surgery, the anesthetist told me I could have the surgery with a local rather than general anesthetic as planned, so I let her make the call for me to be awake. During the drilling my surgeon started complaining at length of why he hates the drill he's using and how it's inferior to the other type or brand. It was apparently the only one he could find at the time and he didn't want to reschedule. Once the screw is in, the surgeon says to close up. Someone asked if the screw should protrude as much as it was, to which he responded no, but we can get away with it, and you never want to take a screw out and put another in as you essentially wear the thread of the bone. Then silence for about 10 seconds while I feel them shifting wrist around, followed by actually we'd better put a smaller screw in. When I was in recovery the surgeon was surprised how quickly I woke up and had a slight look of surprise when I told him I was only under local. Next thing he said was surgery went well. I'm an anesthesiologist and frequently have to remind certain surgeons to watch what they are saying when the patient is awake. Not a surgeon, but I can tell you of one. My mother-in-law had a bad fall while on vacation in Florida and had to have hip surgery. During they nicked her bowels without realizing it until almost 2 days later when she started complaining of abdomen pain and her blood pressure started dropping. By then she was already septic, went into a coma, and they couldn't save her. The hospital declared her death natural causes. We only know otherwise because my husband's family hired someone to do an autopsy before they cremated her body. That's devastating. Sad to hear about the loss. Glad your family was able to find out the truth and have evidence. Hope you were able to get the hospital to own up to the mistake. My mother's surgeon, well, not doing basic math correctly and sewing up a woman having spine surgery with 2 sponges still inside of her. Apostrophe. My mom was 20 plus years sober, so she refused most of the pain meds. When they had to confess they ducked up. She had a mental breakdown facing all that pain again. She got a lawyer and they settled as soon as possible. About $50,000. Mom thought that was fair. But my godfather is a retired federal prosecutor and said it would have been $100,000 easy with another attorney. Update. Want to thank everyone on behalf of my mom for the good thoughts. This happened about 15 years ago. My mother has a master's in biology and knows, well, shit happens. It's a testament to her character that she decided the settlement was fair for an accident. Yet another example of how extraordinary my mom is and how underappreciated this retired HS biology teacher remains. He's probably right. $50K for that kind of screw up is getting off easy. I'll share my not a surgeon, but encountered a weird hospital mistake. Worked for a funeral home. Picked up remains from the hospital morgue and discovered an extra foot prior to cremation. Was an interesting call to the head of that department. +/-1 foot is a reasonable margin of error in the morgue business. I'm not a surgeon, but a nurse. We were doing an APR for a patient with rectal cancer. Quick summary. You remove the rectum/anus. Close the anus and the patient has a colostomy for the rest of their life. This procedure was done robotically. The rectum was removed/detached and wasn't immediately removed. Not uncommon. I went to lunch and when I came back noticed the lack of specimens on my table. The patient was already closed and minutes away from being extubated. The surgeon had to return to the OR, reopen the patient and remove the specimen. Big deal. But luckily no real harm to the patient. Yikes. A detached rectum just roaming in there would have led to a lot of issues. Necrotic tissue etc. Very glad they caught it before the patient was awake. I'm a nurse who works in the operating room with surgeons. Let's say sometimes it's better the patients are asleep. You know something is wrong when the surgeon starts swearing. I had brain surgery a few months ago. They put a shunt in, my first one, so it goes from the center of my brain to my abdomen. When I woke up I vaguely remember him saying my intracranial pressure was really high. After a few days in the ICU from a brain bleed that luckily healed on its own. I went home. I get to my post-op and ask him how high it was, thinking he measured it like you would during a spinal tap. So then this lovely conversation happened. Surgeon, oh we didn't measure it. Me, how do you know it was high then? Apostrophe. Surgeon smirks and does a half laugh. Well, I drilled through your skull and of course spinal fluid comes out. But with you, it was so high. As soon as I got through, your skull had shot out, covering me and the wall behind me. Never seen anything like it. And I had to get a new gown. My mom, the surgeon and I had a good laugh at that. I imagine there were some swears while trying to manage that situation. And I wish I was awake to hear it. I had to wait 3 years for this surgery because Noon believed I was suffering as much as I was, and he believed me and fixed it. Endless grateful for all surgeons and nurses. You guys are heroes. Med student. So I was just there to observe. Elderly lady with dementia in for an above knee amputation. After cutting through her tissue to expose her femur, the surgeon started with the bone saw and within a few seconds started cursing and everyone around him seemed perplexed. Turns out the patient had a rod in her femur that the surgeon did not know about. A few other surgeons came rushing in a few minutes later, and they all figured it out eventually, with a mallet and lots of pounding. I had a lot of questions, but was not in the right place to ask with all the tension in there. I guess it was a learning experience. Geez, all they had to do was a pre-op x-ray and see it in there. A long time ago I worked for a law office as an administrative assistant. The office represented doctors who were going in front of medical board to defend their licenses when they were accused of violating medical conduct. There were surgeons who routinely left items in their patients over and over again, who kept getting let off. A doc who was forging paperwork for parents to show that they provided services to their kids when they were never provided, which caused an outbreak of disease and resulted in innocent people dying. There were doctors who were using their medical knowledge to poison family members. I obviously can't go into any detail, but that shit was terrifying. Most of them kept their licenses and faced no recourse besides losing a little money in a malpractice suit and getting their malpractice insurance raised and occasionally paying a fine to keep their license. There are a lot of good doctors out there. These were not them. Scary outcomes. Crazy. The Drive Death podcast was really eye-opening in just how hard it is to get rid of a bad doctor and how they just get shuffled around and even given good reviews from the place that gave them the boot. Dad is a vet and I've helped him on many farm calls. One time we were pulling a calf out of a dairy that refused to push for God knows what reason, when suddenly we heard a nasty pop and saw her hip drop. I'm not sure exactly what went wrong as this was a long time ago, and working with my dad convinced me not to go in the medical field for any reason. I don't mind blood and stuff, but the pressure would get to me quick even with animals where the consequences aren't nearly as dire. But I do know they had to put that cow down. After we left, my dad had to look at me and give me a hard lesson on accepting failure. You can hate failure. It can make you feel not good enough. It can tear you up inside and crush you. And nobody can tell you it wasn't your fault or can make you feel better about it. But at the end of the day, life goes on. And all you can really do is accept it and keep moving forward. That is a powerful lesson to give. Very good parenting. Not a surgeon, but my mom told me the story of how I had to surgery after I accidentally cut my eye open with a stick and my doctor was trying to fix my pupil. Apparently my pupil was in the shape of a football and he tried to make normal, but instead he ducked up, and it made my vision worse. Now because of that my vision is 20/100ths in my left eye and it can't be fixed. I've already wrote one, the one about the knee surgery, but here's another. This one is not a personal experience, but a case that I read and stuck with me. So, a surgeon amputated the healthy leg of a 52-year-old instead of the other diseased leg. He was already cutting the wrong leg when a nurse looked through the patient's file and stopped informing him that he had been working on the wrong leg. Apparently the surgeon denied responsibility for the error and shifted it to other staff members involved in the surgery. Since the blackboard in the operating room schedule and the hospital computer all listed the wrong leg for amputation. Also the wrong leg had also been prepared for surgery prior to the doctor's arrival. The surgeon added that he didn't realize that he was cutting the wrong leg because it was also diseased and might have needed to be removed in the future. Med student here. I was going to be watching a procedure of a 60-something-year-old lady get her passemeter leads changed on a Monday. Well, right before the attending began the procedure, and she was still a little awake before the anesthesia was completely administered. She let everyone know that she had smoked crack the day before. The procedure had to be postponed to Wednesday of that week to let the cocaine get out of her system. Then when the attending called the sister of the patient to let her know the results and any precautions they had to take, the sister asks the doctor if her sister could smoke again. Because the phone was on speaker, the entire room just facepalmed. Once left a scalpel inside someone's chest. Not a surgeon or anything. Just like stabbing people. Hey PSSST. Please subscribe and like.